the biggest fish, the best fish, are almost always a well-placed fly the very first time. And so people who practice are practicing so that they never have to encounter the issue of a kind of a redo cast.
Yeah.
Because the percentages of catching a really great fish on the second cast go down dramatically.
Well, welcome to another episode of Sun Valley Shop Talk, the podcast about the stories, folks, and happenings around Sun Valley, Idaho. Today in the shop, we're thrilled to welcome our friend, Pete Debaun. Pete is a man whose story weaves together faith, adventure, education, and an unparalleled passion for fly fishing. Pete's journey began when he first visited Sun Valley as a baby in 1960, planting the seeds for a lifelong connection to the valley. After earning a master in divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary, he spent 25 years in youth ministry, mentoring and inspiring countless young lives. But Pete's story doesn't stop there. His second act brought him back to the waters, where he became one of the world's foremost fly fishing guides. Since 1998, Pete has been a guide with Silver Creek Outfitters, and since 2004, his work has taken him to over 40 countries, sharing his expertise and love of the sport with anglers around the globe. As one of the only 200 master casting instructors worldwide, Pete is a true ambassador for fly fishing. Closer to home, he's lived in Sun Valley for over 30 years and continues to guide on its iconic Silver Creek and Big Wood River. Beyond fishing, Pete's dedication to education led him to play a pivotal role in establishing Zambia's first private university, Northrise University, showcasing his heart for making global impact. From the waters of Silver Creek to international rivers and far-reaching educational endeavors, Pete's life is a testament to what can happen when passion meets purpose. Today, we're diving deep into his journey, his love of Sun Valley, and the lessons he's learned along the way. Pete, welcome to the shop.
Thanks, boys. Nice to be with you.
Absolutely. Okay, so we ask our guests all this question to start. What brought you to Sun Valley, and what keeps you in Sun Valley?
Well, I owe it to my mom for my first introduction to Sun Valley. Kind of an epic old school Idaho moment where she showed up, 5 kids in tow, and 1960, and she goes into a realtor's office and says, "Here's a deal. You know, I need a job. I need a month's worth of credit, right? I need somebody to move me in, right? And I need a house." And they're like, "No big. Away we go." So literally, I mean, that day, you know, they moved her into a place, $175 for a 3-bedroom place right on Trail Creek, which has been plowed down now. And so that was my first introduction here. And we've been back and forth, kind of splitting our time between Laguna Beach and here, just like winning the lottery. 2 of the sweetest places on the planet, especially the times that I was there. And what's kept me here is, I think, what keeps most people here, just the absolute love for the beauty, the people, the extraordinary kinds of experiences that are afforded people who love the outdoors, who love fishing, who love hunting, who love being in like one of the truly last wild places on the planet, and then mixed with some of the coolest, most sophisticated stuff in the world as well. So yeah, we'll get into that a little later, but yeah, it's an easy decision to stay.
And yeah, I mean, I think for most people listening and everybody that I've talked to in the valley, is you're most known for your guiding as a fly fisherman. So you taught me how to fish. You've taken Dan out.
Tried.
You've taken yeah. And so that's how most people know you. But I think what's interesting is there's so much more to your story outside of that. And I'm really curious about what parts of your story outside of fly fishing actually like inform your time as a guide. So going back to, you got your Master's of Divinity at Princeton Theological Seminary, and then ended up here as a fly fishing guide. What was that transition like? Because you spent decades guiding and decades as a youth pastor.
Yeah.
Where was that transition? Like, why did you get into fly fishing? Were you doing that before, or what?
Well, I always had just a complete love for fishing. So when I was a little kid in Laguna, I used to get off the bus and literally sprint down to the water. And I had a little piece of 2x4 with line wrapped around it and a hook and sinker, and I could not wait to get down to the water, or grab my spear and go spear fishing, and I absolutely adored the sport. And so, but with that, I just had this. It was my deepest and first connection to God and God's sweet creation, and so those things were like a no-brainer, right? And so I always had a love for both. And what happened is my experience in youth ministry, which is like 25 of the greatest years of my life, was totally involved in basically kind of the transformative work with kids, but introducing them to the very best parts of God. And then, interestingly enough, that actually ended up being very similar to what I did as a fishing guide, and almost unexpectedly, where it surprisingly became one of the most transformative jobs I've ever been a part of in my life. And so it was actually a very easy thing to do. I would say some of the most, and organically, the most important conversations that I've had about life and about God were a part of my fishing adventures and profession as much as it ever was as a youth minister or an instructor in college. You quickly come to the conclusion that the people who fish are there for reasons other than just fishing. It's really about the more important things in life. And so it was actually a very easy transition for me. And some of the greatest friends that I have in the world are these clients with whom I have this eternal bond that started on the water, just talking about the things that matter most in life. So, yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Pete has been instrumental to us here at MVP Vacation Homes. He opened up a lot of doors for us when we first got here. I met him through my sister-in-law, and she says, "You got to meet this guy, Pete." So we met the guy, Pete, and Pete's just like, "Dan, if you do these things in business up here, you're just going to kill it." So hats off to you for giving us some info, and Pete was really instrumental in helping us get started and get some jobs going for us and talk around town about us and all that stuff. So I just wanted to give you a gift. We have a hat from the MVP Vacation Homes. And then today,
Guides love swag.
today, Grunt Style is sponsoring us today.
Nice.
And so we have a couple shirts from them.
Nice.
So those
All
are
right.
yours.
Thank you, sir.
One's a shirt, one's a sweatshirt. And if you don't know about Grunt Style, you might want to check them out.
Nice.
But they are veteran owned, and they support all veterans, and
great.
they're really a cool operation. Also,
Awesome.
this great coffee mug that I got. I mean, this thing looks like it'll hold hot coffee for days. So
Good. Well, as a company, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
yeah,
my
absolutely.
my two stepsons are currently serving, and I have a great deal of love and respect for the people who love and serve our country that way. So
Yeah, very good. Well, welcome. We love having you here today, and so we're here to get to know a little bit about fishing and a little bit about the town. And
okay.
me as a fly fisher, again, it's like talking about skiing last time we were talking with Steve Perino on downhill racing. We just don't have the knowledge, but you talk about surfing, and we know that all day long.
Sure.
When it comes to fly fishing, I've held a rod, I've cast, I've mended, I've done all this stuff, and I've caught a fish or a couple fish doing it, but I just don't have the desire to go out and do it like you do.
Okay.
I haven't learned it that way, so maybe that's the problem. I just need to go out and do it a little bit more. But anyway, I mean, you've been in this valley, you've been fishing, and you've seen a lot of people here. What kind of people like to come and fish, and what do your clients look like?
All over the map. I mean, one of the most extraordinary things about my work at Silver Creek Outfitters is the exposure to some of the most interesting people in the world. And I've said this about the fly fishing profession, that you quickly learn that it is a job that introduces you to the most beautiful places in the world, with the most interesting people in the world, doing the most enjoyable sport in the world. And so the people that I fish with are everybody from the director of the CIA to, to a plumbing contractor that I know in Bellevue, all of whom I enjoy equally, and a lot of it has to do with exactly what that sport does to people on the water. It brings out the very best of them. And people that I have fished with that have had kind of almost a global reputation of being some of the scariest, angriest people in the world, on the water have been the sweetest lollipops I've ever been around in my life. Seriously, and talking about the things, that matter most. I mean, I'm telling you, there's something so sweet about what fly fishing does to people and what it does to relationship. That's really one of the untold elements of it. So I've always considered myself one of the most blessed people in the world in terms of
I would agree with that.
The kind of
I know his lifestyle. It's cool.
The kind of friendships that I've developed over the years. I mean, just there's something about developing those friendships on the water, fly fishing, and so we'll talk about that more. But
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you like building the relationships better than fishing?
Depends on the day and depends on the relationship. But no, they're both equally important to me. Relationship, I think, is literally what drives us all. I think it's what we're created for. But there's something about what fishing does to relationship that's really, really special. And sometimes, I cannot wait to be completely alone on a beautiful piece of water. Just me and God and fish. And there's nothing that I enjoy more. But there are days when the most fun I've ever had in my life is just talking about the things that really matter while you're fishing. I've always been amazed by the things that people will share when they're fishing. And so, yeah,
it's really true. We grew up in chaos, down in Orange County, California. And so it was just, you walk out the door, you hear noise. There's just noise going on all around you. And I didn't grow up fishing. I did a little bit when I was a kid, but hunting, I didn't do all of that. And this year is the first year I actually went out bow hunting, but I didn't carry any bow with me. I just trailed along to kind of watch and climb through the mountains. But there was something really, really special about getting out alone in the quiet, in nature, that was just like, oh my gosh, I could pull up a pillow right here and just go to sleep right now. This is incredible.
Right.
So I think that's kind of what you're talking about, getting out in nature. And then you're in nature with somebody. Yeah. And you're having these conversations that you could have with these people that you're not going to have anywhere else in a restaurant or whatever.
Yep. The best.
So true.
Yeah.
Like I just relate to our time surfing. Like that's our, in California, that's your connection with nature, is getting out in the ocean.
Sure.
but you're sitting in a lineup and there's like 100 other guys that are all eager to get a wave. So there's like a lot of intensity. And then I remember in 2018 when you took us out, I think we floated the pond out in Idaho.
Yeah.
And it's just us. There's nobody around.
Yeah.
We're just floating there for 4 hours, catching a bunch of fish. And I'm like, I didn't even know this is accessible. And then now, 5-6 years later, going fishing the big wood by myself and being able to just like the fact that you can find just a piece of landscape that there's nobody else around.
Oh yeah.
And fly fishing is one that you're just so involved in it, and it takes your entire mind away to just focus
absolutely.
on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just so cool. It's been a really cool transition and that's for me, that's been a really fun sport. That's helped me connect with the Valley for sure.
And all kinds of people too.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it called the opiate of the ADD.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's true. It's so engaging. It's so calming. And you never stop thinking about what you're doing, but in a very restful way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And from what I understand now, because I'd say I'm for sure novice, but there is an art to it just as much as there is a science.
Absolutely.
And I've definitely learned the technical side from you, I think, about making sure the presentation of the fly is just right.
Yeah.
But there is can you speak into the kind of art of it? Like, I feel like when you're watching, because you've seen, thousands of people fish. Mm-hmm. Like, have you seen some people fish that aren't necessarily so technically great, but they've just got a nice movement and they've just got good connection with the water? They can maybe, they know how to read water. They can, and that presentation is a little bit different, but still just as effective.
Yeah, there are. One of the things that I do at Silver Creek is I've been involved in teaching the guides the certified casting instructors exam. And it's always interesting to me because some of our guides, and I don't know if it's appropriate to share names, I probably won't, but one of our guides is one of the most gifted anglers I know. He is so wildly fishy, and can comfortably outfish 90% of the people that I know in the state, right? And that's not hyperbole. But getting him to technically cast was absolutely impossible. So there's that kind of angler. And then there's the angler that has the most absolutely beautiful cast in the world, and they just don't have a fishing juju. So it covers the gamut. And so, but that blend of science and art, I think, is kind of when those two intersect well, that's usually when you find the best anglers. It's really the most beautiful cast is almost always one that is functionally the best too. There's a reason why it's so beautiful. It turns over beautifully, it lands beautifully, and that fly that lands beautifully to us is almost always just as beautiful to a fish. Something that lights gently on the water is the perfect imitation of the way that an insect lights perfectly on the water. So yeah,
would you say that it's like the lotto for some people, like as they fish? So for instance, this is my problem, and this is why I don't fish. Because I can't catch anything. And so like my 10-year-old son, who's now 30, he was standing next to me. He baited his thing. We use the exact same bait. We're 2 feet apart from each other. I cast it for him or whatever. We cast about the same distance apart from each other, and he caught like 4 fish and I caught nothing.
Well,
I was just like, you're the luckiest kid I've ever seen. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, I also think that there's something to be said without getting too kind of esoteric, but there is something to be said about the relationship physically between someone who is holding the rod, who has an extraordinary sense of confidence, and one who doesn't.
Uh-oh.
We've always but we've always believed, and there are some who really do believe that there is, you know, just the simple understanding that most scientists have about the way that the entire world is connected electronically, right? It goes equally true for the fishing experience, and even more so because you're connected physically. You know, the angler to the rod, rod to the line, line to the fly, and fly in the water. And so I've always believed that there is a real translation between somebody who has confidence holding that rod and somebody who deeply and profoundly believes that they're going to get skunked.
Yeah, so I didn't think it was a confidence thing, but maybe so. I thought it was just like I'm frustrated.
Yeah, well,
You can feel the frustration through my rod.
Yeah, exactly. You're translating.
I used to think it was the smell of my hand.
Well, you know what? But that actually might technically be true.
Yeah.
Because, there's a great book called The Natural History of the Senses, which talks about that very thing. The way your scent actually changes, predicated upon your demeanor. And so
I'm an angry fisher.
So an angry fisher tying the fly,
Well,
So
another thing though that I did not realize is actually how much smarter some of these trout are.
Oh yeah.
Than I first knew. Like these are intelligent little guys that know what they're doing. They can identify.
Yeah.
They know what they want to eat.
Right.
But I've always wondered, is there a species of fish that you have gone after that is just like kind of the boss, like
the
smartest guy that you got to be real technical with and outsmart? You have a story?
I mean, fishing wise, you're exactly right. And I don't think it's actually species specific. I think it actually has to do more with how that particular group of fish, regardless of species, is being pressured. Pressured fish just become smart fish, and no more true a statement as on the bigwood. The bigwood, a lot of times, it used to be a beginner's Valhalla, but with the introduction of so many anglers and so much pressure, it has become a before dark in the morning, after dark in the evening fishery, and so and that comes from just pressure. And a lot of times you'll see the biggest fish holding undercut banks or in the junk because they won't hang on those seams that everybody fishes. So, but I would say overall, in terms of the highest IQ fish, strangely enough, it's actually the trigger fish that we target in Christmas Island and the Seychelles. And you can throw a fly to a fish that has never seen a fly in its life. It has never seen line in its life. It has never been fished to. And if it doesn't land correctly, or if that hook reflects too much light, you will see it react like somebody just dropped a bowling ball in the water. It's really extraordinary. It has to be perfect. Everything has to be tuned exactly for the fish to eat. And some days they will eat everything and anything, but there are days when they just defy imagination. But there are a number of fish like that around the world. I think people who cut their teeth on a place like Silver Creek love technical fishing, and they love the challenge. And so
is this why you see people practicing in the park, even though they fish all the time?
yes, very much so.
So they're just trying to land it softly.
Yeah, and so there are some places where we take clients where we let them know, and this is a true adage in angling, that your first cast is always the best and it's always the most important. So there are times when you get a second, third, fourth chance, but the biggest fish, the best fish, are almost always a well-placed fly the very first time. And so people who practice are practicing so that they never have to encounter the issue of a kind of a redo cast.
Yeah.
Because the percentages of catching a really great fish on the second cast go down dramatically.
That's interesting. Anybody that I've fished with that's experienced,
Yeah.
the second that first cast, right when we start, it's a catch. Like I've seen that with you, with Andrew.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing. I'm like, how is this happening?
Yeah.
And then I'm like 8 casts in, and he's like, you got to move.
I know. I know. And from, I love the video that Andrew will send me, when he's been deployed overseas.
Yeah.
And he'll be in the Middle East, and it's just this cool video of him doing, just throwing beautiful loops, like at 6 o'clock at night, with his helmet and his backpack. It's really fun.
So cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about our location in the world for fishing and how we have world-class fishing here.
Yeah.
Can we compare that to other places in the world and that you've been to and what you think of that here compared to there kind of thing?
Well, I've always marveled at Sun Valley, and I've told people, especially my guiding buddies, in Montana and different places, about what a remarkable part of the fishing planet that Sun Valley represents, and really kind of in the cultural tourism planet as well. I've always been amazed that you can, within an hour, be on arguably one of the most famous spring creeks in the world, most technically challenging spring creeks in the world, or an hour north, be by yourself on one of the most stunningly beautiful pieces of water, the main salmon. Be fishing completely alone, having an unbelievable day catching steelhead, right? And then return to a place where you are having the best steak with the best glass of wine, listening to a lecture from Rizard Kapuscinski, and then going to a Yo-Yo Ma concert.
Yeah.
Same day. I'm like, where in the planet?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then a lot of times it's all without, a zoo, good people, just everything you'd want, Yeah, I can remember this one time I was actually out with the manager for the band Journey. And he was kind of crossways with them a little bit. I'm not sure if I can say that on this deal, but anyway, so he's like, let's just go fishing. I don't want to be around them, right? And so they're playing at River Run, right? And we're fishing and we're catching fish, and he's grumbling about it, right? And then they start playing my favorite song, when the lights go down in the city, right? And I go, can you just give me a moment? So I pull out my lighter, and I'm just like, when the lights go down, and he's like, you're the worst guide ever, super insensitive.
So that makes me ask the question, I guess, when you fly fish, and do you float in a tube, I don't know what that's called, or down the river in a little raft?
Yeah.
What do you like better? And explain that a little bit, which is what that looks like.
Well, on Silver Creek, we use what are called float tubes, and they're one of the greatest fly fishing inventions of all time. And basically, it's an inner tube with a skirt, and you sit in it, and you float down the river, and you're casting basically downstream to a fish. The beauty of that is that they do not associate someone in a float tube with a bad day, right? Especially on Silver Creek, because so few people hook up on fish. But the beauty of it is that you can position yourself in front of a fish without spooking them, right? Much more than you can if you're up on a bank where your profile tends to spook them like it would any other fish, because they do associate that with things that they need to run away from. So I love that. And plus, it's such a low maintenance, low pressure kind of thing on the body for clients who are older. And so they find that it's really kind of a renewed way of entering back into the sport without feeling like they have to be concerned about balance and falling over and things like that. So I really do love that for a number of reasons. And then it all depends on where you're fishing. I love walk and wade where you're hiking a lot of miles and you're hunting fish. Spot and stock is really fun where you're seeing a fish feed actively and then you're watching the take and the whole thing. It's, to me, anything visual is really of high value for me in angling. And then what I've done the least of as a guide is float trips. Although I think that they're one of the greatest ways to see Idaho, one of the most productive for sure, and a very fun way to spend the day. But as a client, I love being in a boat. Super relaxing, very social, great, just a fun way to spend the day.
So,
No, you go.
so when you're floating down the river, not in Silver Creek in the tube, but if you're floating in a raft kind of a thing, where do you go to do that?
Here, there's a couple of places, depending upon where the guide takes you, but most commonly up on the Salmon, up around Stanley. There are people who use the same kinds of crafts to fish places like Magic and then below Magic. And
So I whitewater rafted down
yeah,
the Salmon
yeah.
in the area that you're kind of talking about, and see those guys going down fishing.
Yeah.
Do they go down the rapids and everything?
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, I know. Kind of double dipping.
Yeah.
And we
all
got to
good.
do that.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah,
never done that trip.
It's good fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
So when you moved here originally, was this your first job? Was guiding?
No.
Okay.
When I first came here this last time in '94,
Okay.
my basic job was working with youth. And so
Okay. That's right.
I was hired by the Presbyterian Church to run youth ministry basically for these little towns all over Idaho, which was a hoot. I didn't even know if it could be done, but we basically just ran these old style, high energy, super fun, wild camps for all these kids from these little tiny towns. And I didn't know if it would work because we're drawing them from everywhere, but they came from all over. And they were some of the funnest camps I've ever been a part of in my life. And it was great because here there were so many people supporting it. And the Hormel family at one point actually sponsored one of our camps. And the entire camp was totally revolved around Spam. So every piece of swag, every watch, every sweatshirt, every hat, everything was Spam swag.
That's awesome.
And so, I mean, so these huge physical battles between teams just to win stupid Spam towels, right? But it was so fun. And I just loved it. And, you know, kids from Duck Valley Indian Reservation all the way up to Salmon and Ryries, really, and just the greatest kids. Idaho, hands down, has the most lovely kind of people on the planet. And if, talking about the things that keep me here, Idahoans, the old school Idahoan people I just absolutely love. Yeah. So great
cool.
fun.
Did you go on a guide trip to get interest in guiding, or how did that start?
So in the 80s, my lifetime best friend, Charlie Johnson, delivered by the same doctor, you know, in Laguna Beach, you know, grew up together, every school, dated the same girls, just, you know. And one of the things that we love to do is just take a different road trip every year. And the very first one that we took was to Sun Valley. And the first thing that we did was we went fly fishing. And it was money. It was so fun. We still have pictures on our walls of fame from that adventure, fishing below Magic on the tailwater section of the Wood and fishing the Wood and Trail Creek. It was a great time.
So
Really
cool.
fun, yeah.
How is the land like? I mean, since then, how much has the landscape changed? Do you feel like this place has been preserved pretty well, or looking back at then, or just
It has changed quite a bit, and I would say the biggest change in the Wood has been the floodplain issue, and then the actual quality of the water. Those two things have changed the most. So, when I was a freshman guide, the floodplain was much different than it was in the last few years. So I started in 1998, and even back then, the comparative pressure was much, much less building wise on the shore. So they didn't rubber stamp as many of the building projects. And so what you had was a floodplain that acted much more naturally. So during the spring runoff, when it moves very quickly, a healthy river spreads out laterally, and then the water slows down, and the fish during the spawn have a place to hold in much more quiet, calm water and rest from the spring runoff. Very, very important for the life of healthy trout. When the banks become too built up, then it becomes the functional equivalent of a fire hose, and there's fewer places for fish to rest. So that's one of the main things. In fact, you've probably heard of Amanda Bauman's Project Bigwood. That's really what it's all about, is to restore the floodplain and the quality of the Bigwood fishing plain. Secondly, I would say it's the quality of the water itself. So whether it's mismanagement accidentally or otherwise, we get the worst grade in the state for water quality. So those things have affected the fishery. And I have always maintained, like a lot of the other old guys who fish it, that the Big Wood is truly a blue ribbon fishery. And if you look at the pictures of the kind of trout that people were taking when the floodplain was in good shape, man, it's a remarkable fishery. And so the buildup along the shore has been kind of the main thing that's changed it. So, but we're working at it, and there's a lot of great people in this valley who care very deeply about things like the Wood, and so
yeah,
a matter of time.
I was curious, since you've been fishing for decades, was there a point where, because a lot of times the things that you love to do, there's also like you start to appreciate it so much that you want to conserve what's there.
Yes.
And that's with almost every hobby, I feel like.
Yep.
So when did that start coming around? Has that always been something you've been interested in, or where
Yeah.
you're like, hey, we gotta?
Very much so. Yeah. So it totally reminds me, and so many of the projects in Sun Valley, whether it's Silver Creek or the Big Wood or other waters around here, like Margaret Mead's words, like never underestimate the power of a small group to transform the world through a little bit of commitment. And that's exactly kind of what saves so many of the best waters in the West. And one of the things that I've always believed is so necessary. If you take a look at what happened to Silver Creek and that whole project to purchase it and put it in the hands of the Nature Conservancy, when you look at what's happening now with Project Bigwood, when you look at all these things, it's just a matter of time before it hits pay dirt and it does something of real value. And so we're so fortunate that we have the kind of people and impetus, to make those kind of things happen. So I couldn't be more supportive of it. It's when I am a true tree hugger, is when it comes to the conservation of waters that are so rare. Yeah. So,
And that you have a question? I don't want to steal it.
I will.
Okay.
Go.
I was just gonna bring it up because we were just talking about your trip to Slovenia.
yeah.
And how unbelievably clear that water is.
Yes.
Over there. Is that? I'm just curious. Is that like a naturally occurring thing because there's not as much footprint over there, or are they doing a really good job conserving what's there? What's going
Yes
on
and
over
yes.
there? Okay.
Yeah. So, as you probably know, historically, Slovenia was not involved in World War II. It dodged a lot of the kind of things that befall war and torn countries, especially when it comes to natural resources. And so that, in combination with the fact that it has a group of people that have been so dedicated to caring for the waters. People like Evald Graber, who actually is a guide in the valley, who has been guiding there for years, who cares very much about it. People like him and the other guides and conservation groups in Slovenia have kind of produced this extraordinarily well managed. Some people think overmanaged. I don't think there's, really such a thing, but the management translates to beautiful water, beautiful stream beds, extraordinary fish, and an environment that absolutely awes the world. If you ever go to Slovenia, you'll understand. And if you ever go on one of the trips with Evald, you'll understand right away. Boy, this is what well-managed water does. When you're on Silver Creek and you're around all of the people taking water samples, temperature samples, things, guys like Greg Loomis and crew, when you see the hard work that they put into it, a lot of people think, man, that's a lot of work, for a few miles of water. But then when you fish it, you're like, yep, I totally get it. It's worth every bit of it. Clear water, beautiful weed beds, places where insects and fish and birds work beautifully together. I mean, it is an emotional experience when you watch all of the things work in concert together and you see beautiful populations of fish come back, insects come back, birds come back, all because of the efforts of people who really care.
That's where I was going to go next. With Silver Creek, if you haven't seen Silver Creek, you have to come to Idaho just to experience Silver Creek. As Pete was saying, it's a natural fed, spring fed water. And if you haven't seen it, you have to come to MVP Vacation Homes, rent at one of our places, and go down there and fish it. So I have a question. Is there any rainwater that gets into that water?
Yes.
Or is it just 100% spring water?
It's both. It's both.
It's both.
Yeah.
But it
The
stays
vast
full
majority
all
of
summer
it
long.
is because the vast majority of it is from the aquifer, right? And of course, you can't deny the fact that atmospheric
there's
water
gonna be some
is
water.
also contributes. But
So is there any place like that in the world?
yeah, there
Where
is.
because
Slovenia is one of the places, and
'Cause
there's
that's
a number
really
of
cool.
places around the world. Croatia is one of them that has a number of great spring-fed waters. A lot of the Nordic countries have some, but this is in our country. It's one of the largest and best natural spring-fed fisheries.
Well,
It's extraordinary.
It's out on the flats, right?
Yeah.
So when you come in, fly into Sun Valley, look down,
Yeah.
and you'll see it's just flat, and there's just water like coming out from all different places and fingering into this one.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
In fact, the same dynamic that creates Silver Creek creates a number of spring-fed fisheries along what's called the Fly Highway, which is basically from the Owyhee all the way out to the Yellowstone. And basically, what it is it's a lava plain, and coming right up against a long run of mountains, and then the water that comes out of those watersheds hits bedrock. It's forced to the surface as spring water, and nothing is better for trout than consistently cold, clean water that comes from comes from beneath because it's filtered, it's clean, it's highly oxygenated. The bugs love it, weeds love it, the plant life loves it. Huge amounts of oxygen, and so you get places like Silver Creek. Reason why it's world famous.
What's the largest fish you pulled out of there?
Oh, probably 31 and a half is about the largest to hand. And then we've lost fish in close that were 3 or 4
Is
inches
that a
big.
record or is that your record?
That's my client's record. And I've caught fish similar to that, but it's really
That's big.
my client. Yeah, that's a very big.
Yeah.
Anything over 25 is really extraordinary. Usually ends up over the fireplace.
Yeah.
But yeah, 30 is a straight up farm animal. So
Speaking of that, I have a question because me to being a non-fisher, it seems like everybody catches releases. Does anybody eat fish here?
yeah, they do. And in some places, it's actually one of the best conservation mechanisms in place. So if you go up to the high country, there's too many trout in a lot of the lakes. And Fish and Game would ask you as a favor, please take what you catch, so that you can keep the waters basically free of disease. Places like Silver Creek, it's kind of a no-no, and there are places on Silver Creek where you can still take fish, but overall, it's pretty rare that they do. So, but there are places where it's part of a greater conservation ethic, and there's some places where the systems are so healthy that it actually works against it. So when there's too many fish, then disease comes into play. And then when you watch the natural cycle of disease die off and then a new generation arise, it takes a long time for that cycle to complete. So shortcutting it by taking fish out is a great way that managers can take care of it. So, yeah.
Do you have and this fundamentally, this question doesn't make sense, but I just always want to ask you this: if you could have one fly that you could only use, what would that fly be?
Oh boy. That's
like a universal fly kind of a thing?
Well,
Or do you?
I know it doesn't.
A lot of my fly fishing heroes, Joe Brooks, people like that, the Wolves, Lefty Cray, those guys, almost all of them have at one point said that the parachute Adams in all sizes is probably the deadliest dry fly that there is. And it's true. I can tell you that there are days where that bug works as well as any bug in the world. If I had to choose one bug, that's the one I would go to. If you take a look at my fly box, it literally has hundreds of different patterns. And that's because Silver Creek demands that you have that kind of arsenal.
Yeah.
But if I had to have one, it would be that bug in all different sizes.
Yeah, I didn't realize that when I first started going by myself. And I go down to Peekaboo Angler. I'm like, hey, I want to get a fresh setup. I'm going to go fish Silver Creek. And they're like, well, you got to know what season it is.
Yeah.
You got to know what the fish are looking at. You got to know what phase that bug's in.
Yeah.
And you're going to want all the different sizes of that phase just in case. And then I'm like $100 deep. And I'm like, I think I'm just going to fish. Fish Bigwood. And
But if you go out with somebody who's really a gifted angler, and you put on just the right size Adams, parachute Adams, they will illustrate one of the core elements of angling very quickly, which is that it is presentation, presentation, presentation. So somebody who knows what they're doing with an Adams can absolutely tear up the planet. So, yeah.
And that's like that's the fly that you see as like the artwork is the Parachute Adams. I always see that like when people do the illustrations or like at the Neatery or at if you walk into the Pioneer Saloon or like in their bathrooms or something, there's always like some sort of illustration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it has taken care of more than one angler over the years.
There are different shops, I guess, you can go to. You kept mentioning Silver Creek, and so you worked with Silver Creek Outfitters for how many years?
Since '98. So
98.
yeah.
Okay. And so you in that you kind of develop clients, returning clients.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm very fortunate in that. Over the years, I've kind of developed a group of client, guest, friends that have kind of been my mainstay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you still there?
I am. I'm kind of in a semi-retirement mode. So having gotten married a year and a half ago,
Nice.
my life has a little bit
of a
different utility.
Like Mexico for 2 months.
Yes. Or longer if possible.
Or Slovenia
nice.
Or wherever you're going. So when you go to like places like Slovenia or whatever, I know that your clients will ask you to go. And I mean, you've gone to all different kinds of places and you hunt like alligator and boar and all kinds of stuff. So these clients will contact you, and then what happens after that? Because you're not like, you're a guide.
Yeah.
And you guide them there.
Yeah.
Why do they contact you to go do those different kind of activities outside of fishing?
Well, internationally, you end up either becoming a guide or an adventure broker, basically. So a lot of the things that I do around the world, because they're my friends and because we have a relationship, obviously, they'll hear about it and we'll talk about it on the water, and then they'll ask me to put together a trip. So whether that's taking them fishing on the Zambezi, hunting hogs in Texas, or going to Cuba, whatever. I basically become the person who puts the trip together, and then we go do that. And it's much more of a hobby than anything else. But it's been,
So see, I told you this guy has a killer job, killer life.
Yeah.
Now he's married, so it's even better.
Oh yeah.
And then you go to Zambia on top of that. So tell us about Zambia.
So Zambia, people have asked, what's the one place in the world that you like to fish most? And that's almost an impossible question to answer. But I would say internationally, it always comes down to the Zambezi and Zambia. It's really a home away from home for me. Back in 2003, I went over to help start Zambia's first private university, Northrise University, which is one of the great privileges of my life. It's grown into something very special. And then I started a nonprofit to help orphaned and vulnerable children basically go from the streets through college. And so our big deal is through Give Hope for Life, which is the name of the organization. Our basic deal is taking kids who have just been broken by life and then transforming them through so many different avenues, but through education and nutrition and mentoring and giving them this wonderful spiritual environment, and then getting them through high school, and then the end game for a lot of them is getting through college. So we've got kids who came to us sick and in rags who have now graduated with the highest honors from the most difficult technical program in the country and are now teaching at the orphanage school. It's really cool. Yeah, giving back. We've got accountants that have gone through our program. They come there and they give their time for free because they love it, because so that's, to me, one of the most meaningful things in the world. And of course, on top of it, I get a take people down to the Zambezi and throw for tigerfish, which is really about my favorite fish on the fly. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, the work that you guys do over there is amazing. I mean, obviously, we've been a part of that, and just not. I actually haven't visited.
Yeah.
I do some stuff in Uganda, but Zambia, yeah, I haven't visited over there. But just to see that school grow,
Yeah.
and what's happened out of it.
It's remarkable.
Some of the videos and some of the
it's
things I've seen are incredible.
It really is. It's really remarkable. And
I mean, just the facility itself.
yeah,
Holy cow.
my goodness. Yeah. The university has become something that has just really shocked us.
Yeah.
Northrise, we hoped and we worked to this end and we believed to this end, but we were still like, my goodness. We're all amazed that this little startup college in Zambia in 2003 of 65 kids with more dissenters than you can imagine. And everybody's like, what in the world are you trying to start a college in one of the 10 poorest countries in the world? Well, as God would have it, it ended up being what it is now, which is like 1,200 kids. 4 members of parliament have graduated from the school, right? It has a law school. It has the top technical college in the country.
Wow.
It's absolutely remarkable. And to boot, the students that I work with ended up doing things like managing and directing this orphanage school. And it's remarkable, the dent that they're making and the contribution they're making. So for me personally, when we speak of relationship and how valuable it is, nothing could be more important than seeing a beautiful little child that was living on the street now totally transformed, going to school, helping their family, making a living, right? And then, then heading down to the Zambezi and getting yanked out of the boat by a 10-pound tiger, I mean, it is a really wonderful world and a very special world to me. And so, yeah,
It's
thank
interesting.
God every day, man.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk. It makes me think that you pull a kid, he's living on the streets, it has no purpose, and you give him purpose.
Yeah.
And what that does to people.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I always try and tell people, as much as a lot of my life has been predicated on my ability to articulate things, right? I can't articulate what happens at the orphanage, and I can't articulate what happens in Africa. I just tell people you just have to do it, and you have to experience it, and then they kind of, get that, oh yeah, I get it now sort of look. And but it really is. It's a really special thing. It's an extraordinary privilege, whether it's through guiding or youth ministry or work with orphans, to be in the role of helping change a life. It's the best thing that there is, man. It really is. And so, yeah, I feel totally blessed. I feel extraordinarily blessed by the friends and the family and the community that I've had in Sun Valley. The amazing level of generosity and love and help that has come, that's made these things possible. When we started the orphanage project, we had 300 kids stuffed into a mud brick room, and all we did was we gave them 12 ounces of what we called a miracle milkshake. It was cornmeal, sugar, and a little protein powder from soy, right? And that absolutely was the game changer for them. And an English lesson, right? And it's 300 kids stuffed into something. It's like a 2-car garage, right? And to see kids go from that, right, to where they are now has so much to do with Sun Valley. And the very first way we raised money is we ran a fundraiser called Fishing for Life, which is it's a bunch of burned out guides in September giving me a day to raise money for kids. And the whole thing was, you know what? Go out with your favorite fly fishing guide, and with the money that you get from that one trip, we're able to feed all the kids for 1 month.
Wow.
So everybody jumped in, and on the very first fundraiser, somebody tipped us $25,000.
Oh, wow.
Yep, and that's how we built the first school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So it gives you some idea of what this place is all about.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Have any
awesome.
of those kids grown up to go to Northrise?
Oh yeah,
Have it really-
totally.
okay.
We've got 16 kids from the orphanage that are there now.
Wow.
And like I said, one of the students that's now teaching at the orphanage school called Mapalo Morning Glow Academy
Okay.
graduated with highest honors from their IT program. And now he is the director of our computer learning center. And so he's teaching all of our teachers how to learn computer, same thing with our high school kids, things like that. And it's amazing. I mean, you meet this kid and you're like, man, that's going to be the ambassador of Zambia someday. So it's really
So cool.
fun.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about that, how, because I mean, you work closely with my grandpa since I was born. So
Yeah.
Northrise has been like a part of my life since I can remember.
Love that guy.
And it's crazy now that we're at 20 years. And I remember the first we met at that we used to have the strawberry farms and go and have the banquets.
Yeah.
And the first graduate, dude, I don't remember his name, but he ended up going to Baylor too when they had the connection with Baylor.
Yeah. So Malenga Chela.
Yes. Yeah. Malenga.
What an unbelievable story.
Yes.
The kid who ended up in prison because he ended up kind of throwing in with a guy who was like a thief and he didn't know about it, right? And then he ends up having such a huge impact on the prison that they invite him back every year because he had such an enormous spiritual impact on this community. I mean, the warden, the guards.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's like the chaplain of this place. It is the most wild story. It is such a book-worthy story.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
So-
And then he ends up getting his PhD in Baylor.
Yeah.
Runs the table, straight A's, full scholarship kid, you know. And if you saw where the village that he comes from, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It is really cool.
And that he's one of many stories that have come out of the orphanage in Northrise. And but the cool thing is I didn't know how much of I mean, you brought this in, but how much of a support Church of the Bigwood has been for them.
Huge.
And that was cool to see when I first moved here.
Yeah.
And seeing that tie, there's just bridges between all these different churches supporting Northrise. And
amazing community.
It's actually a big, you're right, Sun Valley has been a huge help. And some people don't even know that. Really. So yeah, it's
amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, my clientele, you know, many of whom have never darkened the door of a church in their life.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, they just like, they call me.
Yeah.
Do what can I do? How can I help? And, you know, just a beautiful community of, you know, of just people from all walks of life. Yeah, love them all. They're the best.
Well, out of the stories of Sun Valley come stories, you know, outside of Sun Valley, and that's the greatest thing about Sun Valley. And so we're gonna wrap things up because we could probably talk all day long. But don't forget, MVP Vacation Homes. We're here. If you guys want to rent a place and grunt style. I'm actually wearing one of their shirts. I forgot to mention that, but go on there, go on the websites and check us out. And then also don't forget to hit the subscribe button or the like button, or I think there's even a bell that reminds you when we do put these out that they're out there for you to see. So tell your friends, pass these things along. And Pete, we want to thank you for just a great time. I mean,
My pleasure, boys.
we found out some really good stuff. A lot of times when I'm sitting here, I don't learn so much, but when I watch back on the show and see and listen. I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that. So I'm learning as we go. So
Awesome.
good job, Spencer, and we'll see you guys all next time.
Yeah. And if you have a good story about Sun Valley or want to be on the show, go to sunvalleyshoptalk.com and just hit come on our show at the very top and fill out that form.
Your next adventure starts here. Visit our website to learn more. And be sure to join our community on Instagram. We'd love to have you.